So I have to put a few things out there. First of all, I'm not a public speaker. Those speakers were great, by the way. As a business owner, I was kind of soaking in. I'm on the front line in all this stuff. But I'm a photographer. And I have to ask, in the room, are there any rock stars here? So according to the US Census Bureau, the only thing harder to make a living at than photography is being a rock star. So I think just in the fact that I'm standing in front of you, I've had a long career, I'm fed, you know, and I've raised a family, I feel kind of thankful for my successes. It didn't start out well, as you can imagine. I learned photography in high school. I went to a public school in Imperial Beach. It was not the best education you could have had, but it did propel me to want to be a surfer instead of a student. So I left home at 17 and I moved myself to Hawaii, and I was going to be a surfer. I had a cousin who lived there who was very wise, and she looked at me and said, "How are you going to make a living?" And I hadn't thought it through that far. So I said, you know, I learned how to do photos, and you know, I can take pretty good photos. I won some awards and this and that in school. So the next day I was working in Waikiki shooting tourists going to luau's. I may have photographed some of you guys. And so from age 17, I've only made a living with my camera. I have had crazy ups and downs. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I do want to tell you one story. One day, through the course of my work, I found myself in a helicopter in Alaska. I was riding to an unexplored area of the Chugach Range in Valdez. Sitting next to me was Doug Coombs and 3 or 4 of the top snowboarders in the world. We had this crazy Austrian pilot. He was literally crazy. We were going to ride a peak that nobody had ever ridden before. We circled around it. My heart was in my throat. I didn't know if I could do it. And as we circled around, we saw that there was no landing zone. I was like, whew, okay. But Heinz, our pilot, said no problem. Under full power, he stuck the skids in the slope, opened the door, looked at us and said, "Get out." I don't know if you've ever looked down 2,000 feet under a full rotor wash, completely out of your element, but that was me. I almost cried and peed my pants and did everything all at once, but I got out because you had to do it. And I'll never forget being stuck in the snow. Heinz pulled away and dove down the slope in his helicopter, because that was his form of riding. But for me, that's kind of how my life as a photographer has been. It's like right now. I am a crazy introvert, and speaking to people is terrifying for me. And right now, I'm clinging to the slope going, oh boy, I hope I can make it through this one. But it's interesting because I think that what I've noticed in my work and I've worked with a lot of people, and I'll go into that a little later, but what I've noticed is that I think the thing that I love most about what this group represents and what our country represents is that risk-taking. We've all gotten out of the helicopter at some point, in some place, in some time. And it was made very clear to me. I was in the New York Athletic Club with a guy that I'd met in a treehouse in Costa Rica, which is a whole nother story, invented the euro and da-da-da. And I'm looking at, oddly, now that I think about it, Trump's locker, Robert De Niro and this and that. And I meet this guy, he's like some character, I can't remember his name. He was like a big wig on Wall Street. And most of the guys in that club were just shutting me down. You're a photographer? I was like, boom. And I met this guy, and he was like really intrigued with me. And he said, what do you do? And I said, well, I really love surfing, and I swim out in the ocean and I'd do pictures of surfers and da-da-da. And he immediately adapted. He said, you know, that's amazing. Tell me more. And we went off and we had a drink, and he said, you know, at the end, he said, I kind of do the same thing. You know, I'm riding these financial waves, and I figure out when to jump in. I ride the wave, and before I get killed, I jump out. So we're kind of the same. I'm like, wow. But what that showed me is the brilliance of that man, his ability to kind of look beyond the norm and beyond the cliches and beyond the stereotypes. And I think that that's kind of what I hope to do with my images. I'm going to show you a group because they speak a lot better about things than I do. I want to set up the slideshow title. It's called Unmarketable. I went off after a few years of working in Hawaii and kind of getting a foothold and doing quite a bit of work and working in the editorial world. I did what most photographers were supposed to do, which is put your portfolio together, go to New York, get an agent. So I put my portfolio together, went to New York, and I went to agent after agent after agent after agent. And they all looked at me, and I couldn't find that guy like I met on Wall Street. They all said, you know, these pictures are interesting, but you're totally unmarketable. And so here I am today, unmarketable.
So clear it shone like gold. Then a voice like thunder clapped as a dead man I collapsed. I am the first, I am the last. Now rise, my son. With man and rain.
So that's a very personal bunch of images. There's a lot of things in there that my wife goes a little crazy over, like, why do you like that seahorse picture so much? I looked 10 years all over the world for a seahorse, and I found one in the Bahamas, and they're this big. And I was over the side, I lost him. 45 minutes later, I found him, I got my photo. So there's a certain tenacity required in this job. But you know, it was interesting, when I was rejected by all those agents, if you had told me then that I would go on to generate tens of millions of dollars with my images, work with the biggest companies in the world like Apple and Google and Mercedes-Benz and Yamaha and blah, blah, blah. And I would have told you you're a little nuts, because I had this drive and this vision for the ocean and for nature and for surfing, and that was my thing. And you know, a lot of people that my peers kind of spun off, and one of them actually became a really good car cinematographer, which he was a lot more successful financially sooner than I was. But the interesting thing is that images are the language of our day. And it's really interesting to me now in this phase of my career where I have 2 art galleries, and I'm working with a lot of companies, helping them to bring art or bring images and art into their environments. And the impact has been far greater than I could ever have imagined. And what I really love most about what I do now is bringing joy and inspiration into environments. We see it on a residential level. We work with businesses now, and it's amazing. But for example, I have been working with hospitals lately, and I got a call from Sharp Hospital. This is a good story. I get invited to bid on the art for this new Rancho Bernardo hospital. I've never done that before. I walk in a room, there's 6 of the most prominent art consultants in San Diego. One of them looks at me and says, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm bidding on art." And the way that art consultants work is that they basically repackage other artists. If you Google Rancho Bernardo images, you will see that I had an incredible advantage because there are no images of Rancho Bernardo. So I took 40 years of experience and I applied my craft to Rancho Bernardo. And I have to tell you that I am excited to the nth degree to present this body of work to the doctors and to the nurses and to the patients of the hospital, because I made Rancho Bernardo look great. And you know, it's interesting, but I have a 12-year-old and we watch Marcus Lemonis' show, The Prophet, and he's always talking about trust the process, trust the process. So when I got that job, I said, oh, I'm going to trust my process. I'm going to apply myself to Rancho Bernardo. I'm going to look at it through a fresh set of eyes, employ every little device that I've acquired along the way, and it worked. And I'm really excited about that, and so excited because it helped me to win the Sharp Chula Vista Ocean Tower project, which is, unlike Rancho Bernardo, kind of a big budget thing. I have 2 years to shoot it, but my subject is the South Bay. Now I can kind of diss it a little bit because I grew up in Imperial Beach and I'm from the hood. But it's going to be a challenge. It may be one of the biggest challenges of my career, but I'm excited to no end to do it. Anyway, I wish I had clever stats and things to offer you, but I will say that the art, the things, the imagery that you bring into your businesses can really affect your productivity, your atmosphere, your environment. And you know, I worked with an insurance company, and lately the owner called me and said, you know, I've got a problem. I'm like, oh shoot, what is it, Jim? He said, I've got to buy more art because people are stealing them and moving them into their offices. But he said, you know, it's amazing, but I've never done anything for my business that has really gotten my employees that excited. And what we did is, this was a business in Carlsbad, was pictures of Carlsbad. And so, anyway, it's incredibly rewarding, but what was most interesting to me about winning the hospital things is before I won the bid, the work had to be reviewed by a panel of psychiatrists and psychologists and all these people that had to sign off on it. It was kind of a big deal. There was about 20 different people. And it was found, and this was interesting to me, but since I work in the ocean and water is my theme, it happened to fall into this thing where water is one of the most relaxing and calming elements there is. And I focus a lot on, as you see, water with a lot of beautiful blues and color and stuff in it. And I found out from this panel that not only does the water relax people, but the blues actually trigger these places in the brain that can promote healing endorphins and release them into the brain. I'm like, wow, I knew that. Yeah, I knew that. So anyway, that's all I've got to say. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for your time.